Dublin and Stanford University also have very, very powerful papers. The most recent one is showing naltrexone when used topically in the eye, and it's had quite a positive effect on certain types of retinopathies where the retina in the eye the tissue has stopped growing. And again, they're looking for controlled proliferation or controlled growth of cells. Not overgrowth, just controlled growth. So when the body, naltrexone enters the bloodstream, the badly spelled bloodstream, within 20 minutes. The peak is within an hour. It drops off completely in 4 to 12 hours. Now, 12 hours, that's an hour, that's getting towards a long, that's the outer limit of it. If you use the dose too high, that 12 hours could pan out to 20 hours, and now you're getting a period of effect that's probably too long for the counteraction that we require to work. It occupies the opioid receptors, as I said, all of them, without distinction, and it crosses the blood-brain barrier. So naltrexone does get into the brain. That's, after all, how it works in reducing dependence on opiates, dependence on alcohol, and also it seems to be very effective in treating self-harm in autistic individuals. There are new receptors, and they're the main ones that it seems to occupy, but it has been proven also to occupy the delta and kappa. That's important because the three opioid receptors have different actions and cause different effects in the body. The short low dose causes an increase in opioid growth factor, also known as metenkephalin 5 or MET5-enkephalin, and a growth in the receptors. As I said before, that's important. Ian Zagon mentions this in his paper. Those of scientific curiosity about this drug should read Ian Zagon's paper, his most recent paper on its anti-proliferative effect in cancers. It's these effects that have the anti-proliferative effect on cells, and it may have significance in controlling remyelination as well as demyelination, in the control of tumour growth, and in other proliferative or hyperproliferative growth. It looks like naltrexone and the opioid growth factors affect the rate at which cells regrow or grow during a stimulus. Low dosage and fast dosage is vital to prevent overgrowth of new receptors. As I said, if the dose is too high and for too long, all the sites are occupied and the body just starts throwing up new sites. It's a bit like the building boom. Suddenly you end up with too many and nobody knows what to do with them. And that's literally what would happen if you continue. I suppose in pharmaceutical terms, what happens is the body starts to build up resistance. It makes new receptors. All the morphine has occupied the existing ones, or all the naltrexone. So the body makes more, and then it requires more drug, or the symptoms start reappearing. And that's why you get tolerance and addiction to morphine and codeine and morphine-like drugs, because quite simply the body builds a resistance to it, and then builds new receptors, and then says, come on, bring it on, where is it? And hence the terrible affliction of addiction to the morphine-like drugs, narcotics. We want to prevent long-term blockade, as I said. That would block out the rebound effect that we seek. The rebound is the opioid growth factor and the endorphins. The body knows the receptor's been occupied and says, whoa, hang on, we better produce more endorphin because it's not working quite as well. Meanwhile, the naltrexone wears off. Then you have a double effect from the endorphins. And this initial effect is pain relieving, muscle relaxation, but the long-term effect seems to be on proliferation. And this is where research needs to focus. To avoid hypersensitization to opioids in future, this is a well-known factor that also occurs if you block all the receptors. You get massively sensitive to opiates in the future. So if you block all the receptors, the body throws up new ones. If you suddenly, or if the blockade wears off and you take subsequently even a small dose of a narcotic, even something as simple as a sulfidine tablet, there is a high risk of hypersensitization, which means you would seriously overreact. Most likely, and I think one of our prescribers has seen this already, most likely in the form of a narcotic withdrawal type syndrome with extreme nausea, diarrhea and vomiting. It explains why some people react very badly even to a small dose of a narcotic after having been on doses of naltrexone, not yet higher doses of naltrexone. The barriers to its use by prescribers for patients, the profits or lack of isn't a barrier to the prescriber, but it's a barrier to the industry having any interest in it. You know, we're not interested in anything that doesn't make us money. It would be an adage, it's fair to say, is rife among medicine, pharmacy. You know, our whole research industry is driven, and even the independent research studies that you look at in the National Institute of Health, for example, in the States, it seems to me that every paper is an independent study by the National Institute of Health, sponsored by Biogen, you know, everything seems to be sponsored by an industry. I can be very cynical about my industry, pharmacy, but there's good guys in it as well. And there are a lot of good scientists. Skip is one of the most eminent and most interesting people I've ever met, and I can't speak highly enough of his independence and of his scientific mind as well. His background isn't just a guy that wanted to stir things in a bucket and hand them out and make lots of money. That guy's a scientist, and there are sadly very few scientists involved in our industry nowadays. I think for the past 10 years we've been overmotivated by quite simply greed, and my profession, just like many of yours, has been not poisoned but certainly damaged by that greed. Conservatism can be innate. You know, I don't want to step outside the box. I don't want to take a risk with my position, because after all, our modus operandi is to do at least no harm. But conservatism can be forced as well, and that's by litigation or safety regulation. We are all afraid of being sued. Speaking as someone who's currently going through a very long legal battle, completely out of the blue, it's frightening. It's frightening when you see what you've worked for all your life, and you know the potential of it being severely damaged. So, you know, when you're kicked in the backside once too often, you do tend to sit down. You know, you tend not to take risks any further. So people are afraid of litigation, and they're afraid of this drug safely because it's unproven for these indications. People are reluctant to step outside the box. But remember, this drug comes from a proprietary medicine that has been proven to be relatively safe. Yes, like all medicines, it has side effects and risks. But I feel what would push many prescribers into this is all right to try, into that frame of mind, is the fact that the dose is 10 times the minimum dose of the licensed product. Is 1/10 of the minimum dose. So it's very low, and most of the side effects of this drug are dose dependent. The hype, I think everyone should read Novella. There's a guy, I don't know his first name, S. Novella. He's a pragmatist, a scientist, and very much an he is an anti-mob type scientist. He's very cynical, he's very anti-LDN because he feels nobody has proven anything yet. Nonetheless, I read all 180 submissions on his website arguing the case for LDN. Nobody made a case good enough to convince him yet, and that's where we've fallen down, and that's where I feel a wee bit guilty. Skip has started the work. The onus is on all of us who do use naltrexone, dispense it, give it out, make money on it, or feel it works, to get more effort behind proving that this drug is at least one of the further studies, or this group of drugs, because let's face it, there are other drugs like naloxone just as cheap that may work just as well. Novella argues that there's a placebo perception. The placebo perception basically goes like this. You'll hear lines like, I know it's doing me no harm. You'll also hear lines like, I feel better in myself from taking it. I feel stronger, but I don't know is it stopping my condition. My point is, and I've said it already, is so what? If you feel better, you know, and you are better, and there's no little or no side effect, it's not making you worse. It's not a cumulative toxin. It doesn't stay in your body for a lifetime. It's cheap. It's maybe the only alternative a lot of people have. So my point, my feeling would be, so what? Let's prove that it's doing more than that. But even if it's only doing that, that's enough in itself. The reported side effects of naltrexone, we have to mention them. You have to be honest. It does have an effect. It appears to affect the liver enzymes. I mentioned already there's dose dependent, and it is. I would have little or no fear of it having any damaging effect. We've had one patient who had 500 that month who had an elevated liver enzyme